We've all walked out of a cinema into the cold night air, feeling completely different from the person who walked in. A couple of days ago, I watched Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, and as the credits rolled, I didn't feel the rush of an epic victory. I felt a heavy, quiet truth. For thousands of years, we've praised Odysseus for his brilliant mind, for the clever wooden horse that won a war. But Nolan asks the terrifying question we all are running from today. What happens when our brilliant innovations outpace our humanity? When the dust settles on our ambitions, we don't fight we don't find the sweet taste of victory. We find the bitter, echoing cries of the innocent, the ordinary families, and the bonds of men we broke to get there. But this isn't a story of despair. It's a story of the most revolutionary force in the universe redemption. No matter how crimson the blood of our rage or how deep the guilt of our mistakes, we are always guided toward enlightenment if we are willing to truly see the wreckage we've caused. Today, we are stepping into the underworld of our ambition, guided by the silent, empathetic gods of our better nature. Grab your headphones, take a deep breath, and let's listen to the echoes. Welcome to another episode of Kest Podcast. Let's talk about the Odyssey. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm now sitting inside my car, right in front of the cafe I walked to buy to enjoy some hot matcha latte, and I watched the film a couple of days ago already, and I saw some film reviews now and a lot of content creators talking about the film. And I wished I had recorded my thoughts already right then and there when I watched it a couple of days back. But I haven't watched a single review because I wanted to keep my opinions and thoughts original. And but yeah, that's all right. I wasn't feeling ready before when after the film has ended because it took 3 hours for it to finish. The duration of the film was 3 hours, so it did end at a later time that I expected it to. I also attempted to go find somewhere to record, but I wasn't able to find any place to be able to record something for an episode of our podcast. So, a film by Christopher Nolan. It's really about the epic story by Homer. And going into the film, I only have a high school student me of a knowledge about the Trojan War, of about Odysseus, of about the Odyssey by Homer. And I haven't really read the literary text, so I wasn't into the details of everything in the or the characters in the film. So go immediately going into the film minutes in, um, I was very lost on a lot of things. So I did prompt Gemini AI for me to be able to review and catch up on some details about the film. So when I was made familiarized on the plot about the storyline, not nearly being given the spoiler, I was able to catch up on the movie along the way, and it was a good decision because I was reviewed by the main synopsis of the film. So also jot down some notes immediately right after because I knew for myself that I wasn't ready to record something. But I've jot down all my impression or what I got is the message is the film is really talking about, or the message that the film wants to give out to its audience. So a quick summary of the film. So the main plot is, so Odysseus is the leader or the mastermind of having the Trojan horse made. So he represented the Greeks, and he made the Trojan horse with a lot of people inside, of warriors inside, for for them to really conquer Troy, the kingdom of Troy. So when Odysseus presented the gift, the people of Troy got the very big Trojan horse inside their walls, and knowing that they've won the war, that the Greeks have surrendered before them and have presented the gift of the Trojan horse. But without them knowing, they were fooled by this act, and the warriors inside the Trojan horse uh, went out of the belly of the Trojan horse, and then they were able to eliminate the forces or the security in the gates of Troy. So when they were able to successfully eliminate the people in there, they opened the gates, and more Greek warriors have entered Troy without resistance because they were able to bypass the security through the Trojan horse. So the Greeks have won the war, and because of this intelligence, of this strategic planning made by Odysseus. So that was a very quick summary of what I've watched, and for this is for whoever who's listening or watching that needs to have a certain kind of a quick recap on what is this story all about. So when the Greeks have bypassed the gates of Troy and have the upper hand on the ongoing war or battle because of their advantage of having the Trojan horse and them being able to bypass the gated security because of Odysseus. In the middle of those moments, Odysseus had an enlightened encounter or sudden realization that he immediately felt the burden and consequences of his doings. So because of his smart strategic planning, the war have transpired in one night, and a lot of people, thousands, have been killed because of him. This is in a very similar theme with the previous film of Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer. For you who don't know, Oppenheimer is a physicist who have created the nuclear bomb, and that's a very quick story, shortcut story. But then, because of his brilliance, he was able to, because he was just curious about the physics of a nuclear atom, and then the power that the nuclear atom really have, and its physics and its science. But then, because of the militarization of the government, then they were able to utilize the findings of Oppenheimer, his research into creating the nuclear bomb. And because of his inventions, there a lot of people were annihilated because of its powers, and Oppenheimer have felt this burden, and as well as Odysseus have felt this burden because of his intellect and his strategic planning. They really haven't fully realized the consequences of war, of this act of war, and the burden of carrying the wailing and the cries of the innocent lives because of their wrongdoings or because of their initial action. So they basically have indirectly caused the killings of a lot of people, and it's really a very big burden. And even Athena was personified as an ordinary citizen of Troy and was beheaded by a Greek soldier. And Odysseus in the film had witnessed it and had the realization that maybe some Athena was saying something to Odysseus. And Athena have appeared a lot in the film. Athena maybe is a persona created by Nolan, or maybe it's in the subconscious of Odysseus that Athena kept reappearing with him in his daily activities, and only to remind him of the true realities of war. It just redirects our attention, gives out a message on the true consequences of trying to assert power over other factions of other nations or other kingdoms. And it's a very timely message on a lot of ongoing wars that is being transpired now in our time here. And he was enlightened by the true reality of war, and by the end of it all, by the end of the acts of war, you'll see not a taste of victory but a painful and bitter truth of the devastation of innocent lives, only to preserve some certain kind of uh, a nation's aspiration or ambition in trying to gain power. So it really compels us to realize that by the end of it all, only the innocent are being affected, and that many people are being killed. And one of the highlights of the film was when Odysseus, so it's a spoiler alert, I mean, this is a spoiler review, that when Odysseus, um, because the Odyssey is about him returning to his kingdom after the Trojan War, and when Odysseus was already in their kingdom, and he's been talking to his wife, the queen, because Odysseus was a king of a certain kingdom. So when he was already talking to his wife, but he was dressed as a stranger then, or a beggar, because he doesn't want to be known as the Odysseus that is the hero of the Trojan War, because there were a lot of suitors in that kingdom. So when he immediately exposed his identity, he might be killed right then and there, because the that's how thinly the stability of a monarch, or the power struggle in those era, or in at least in in the epic story of Homer. So when Odysseus was already talking to Anne Hathaway, his wife, this is the highlight of the film really, because he was really conversing a lot on how he has gone to the Trojan War as and have fought in the battle and have won, in a sense of victory, and have returned as a different man. The film was very sincere. The film was very um, s- serious on these conversations, and a lot of the negative comments or the negative reviews from a lot of people online, their opinions really, I think, stems from the lack of their expected style of the film. Of they wanted to see more epic battles, they wanted to see bigger and more epic adventures. But then a lot of the style of the film now of Nolan, that I've seen from the past years, was he was more into the dialogue of the characters in his films. And going back now, when so we get more dialogues now in the Odyssey, and because Matt Damon, Odysseus, was narrating a lot in the film while the film has been going on. And when he was already talking in front of his wife, again, he was telling her that he was a different person coming back from the war, and that he has realized a lot of things, that the true the true essence of war, again, the true essence of war is not really the victory of gaining power, of gaining control, but he can only find the devastating consequences of the loss of innocent lives. Since Odysseus was seeing Athena a lot in his consciousness, in his subconscious, maybe as a form of a um, metaphor, or as a character wherein he was being constantly reminded of the consequences of his actions, of the consequences of war, as symbolized by the Greek goddess of war or strategic planning, Athena, played by Zendaya. So when Odysseus and his wife are having a serious conversation, you can see Zendaya or Athena weeping and crying and being emotionally affected by the conversations or the speech of Odysseus to his wife, that disclosing what he has realized in the Trojan War. In that sense, I immediately had goosebumps on this realization also, that maybe Athena wasn't really the goddess of war that we know, or the strategic planning goddess that we know, but in that film, a lot of the warriors was praying to the goddess Athena. They were trying to have her power, or to have her protection in the war, to gain victory. But then the Odyssey have depicted that Athena was a very empathetic goddess, was a very empathetic character in that film, that she was weeping in the realizations of Odysseus to her wife, of sharing these relations to her wife, that maybe I realized then that maybe Athena wasn't the epitome of war, of victory, but that maybe Athena was a goddess of those, or a protector of those innocent lives, of the innocent people that's been affected by the war, or in another sense, maybe she was just trying to um, help uh, help the people who's been into war, or who's been orchestrating a war, or has been involved in the war, the warriors, the leaders, and the thinkers or strategic planners, that they weren't supposed to do that. They weren't supposed to pursue war in order to gain control, in order to gain power. But that she really isn't what we have thought uh, she was all along, that she was just merely a goddess wherein she empathizes to a lot of people, especially to the innocent people that who has been victims of war. The other main key point that I jot down after seeing the film was he came to repent. So after he has gained his control, or his power back into his own kingdom, he came to repent. I think he was about to pray to the somewhere in the west for them, for the victims of war. And then I also realized in the film that he was really being guided uh, by a lot of characters in the film, by a lot of goddesses or supreme beings. He was guided to be able to go back to his own kingdom. Maybe because they knew that he was about to disclose these realizations about the true essence of war. In the films, there were a lot of the siren was had appeared to be the 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 scene of the siren was also really striking, because Odysseus didn't close her ears, or didn't put earwax into his ears, because he was ready. He wanted to be helped by the siren to be able to go back to his kingdom, because he was trying to ask for help, and he had gotten help. The sirens were very helpful in trying to give out the directions, or on how Odysseus can go back to his kingdom. And a lot of the singing of the siren also depicted in the film were a lot of, I think it's a poetic disclosure of, like, how the siren sings and knows you and knows your weaknesses. And it's just based on my recall, like, the sirens knew all your weaknesses and all your fears. And when you're able to receive, or realize, or accept those weaknesses, you're transformed into a new being, and you can move on from there. And a lot of people also put earwax in order to not listen to the siren, but uh, helpful, although painfully helpful, because I think the siren also has a very high frequency voice. But Odysseus was able to go to Hades, into the underworld, to be able to meet and have directions and or instructions how to get back to his own kingdom. Along the way, they also were able to meet a witch. I think that's a witch because um, the witch can were able to transform the warriors into a pig, and you can really see the leadership of Odysseus in that, and how he was being helped by a lot of goddesses because he wasn't fearful in front of the witch. He was very clear and very intentful, or very sincere on helping a lot of his people go back to his kingdom. He was looking at straight to the eye of the witch and has really persuaded her not to be vengeful because they were just passing through. They were just passerby, and so the witch have toned down her or have reversed back her powers and turned the pigs back to the warriors. But then, at that by the end of it all, they really uh, didn't survive. That it was just Odysseus that survived the adventure back home, or the sail back home. And one of the things that struck me also was how he was very faithful. Like, he didn't have any fears or doubts, a single pinch of doubt, because since a lot of goddesses, a lot of archetypes or characters in the film were already trying to tell him that he's going to survive no matter what. He was very faithful. He was very um, trusting that even when he only had a slab of wood trying to keep him afloat in above the raging waters in the middle of the night, in the middle of a storm, he was very trusting that he will get back to his homeland. And I realized that, what if we all just need to be that trusting, like Odysseus, that we just need to trust in our circumstances that everything will turn out okay by the end. It's a form of repent on his wrongdoings, or the consequences of his actions, that he didn't really meant to have to kill a lot of people, innocent lives in the Trojan War, and that he wasn't he didn't really meant to be part of that amount of rage that was poured into one night. So they have mentioned in the film that it was a 10-year amount of rage, full of rage, and poured into one night of killing, of battle, of blood being spilled, of innocent lives being killed. The other, it's just another aspect that I think I I've noticed in the film, like the head of the Greek, or the leader of the Greeks in the war. They just mentioned that I think the head of the Greeks' daughter was made sacrifice, and that the line stayed with me, wherein they said that the amount of sacrifice or trade off is what gives value to something, and that is the truth, and that's a really something that stayed with me even at the end of the film, even now that I'm talking about it. Even the wife of the leader of the Greeks had murdered his husband because she was really devastated by this sacrifice of their own daughter in order to win a war. The last line of having forgotten the bonds of men was a huge statement, and it because of the setting of a war, because of the power struggle of or the different factions of the different understanding, or the different culture that these people involved in a war are, like, just because of their differences or the different culture, the different understanding, they have forgotten that fundamentally you are not bound by your race, that you're not bound by your nationality, by your identification or identity based on your geographic location or just the culture you're born into. There's a basic human sense in a simple bond in another of a man into another man, like the simple bonds of man is isn't really supposed to be bounded by these descriptions of what is your nationality, what culture are you protecting, what land have you been trying to conquer because you gain power into this. You are strategic about something and you should control this and that. So lastly, that I want to talk about, we shall never forget these types of um, stories. These are really just stories, no matter how epic is the sound in an IMAX theater. These are just stories that has been echoed in a lot of classrooms even when I was still in high school. These are stories, even classic stories that were being cited in a lot of literature, and even now in this film we're being reminded. This is a classic story of power struggle, of deception, of I just really appreciated um, being turned into a great film by Christopher Nolan. In this film, in this creative project, they have highlighted divine personas and goddesses being empathetic to us humans, to a lot of innocent lives, and I really appreciated that aspect of the film. And I was really emotional at the end of the film when Odysseus was speaking to his wife, and Athena was weeping. I was really emotional in terms of I have felt the gravity of what's been going on around in during our time now, because it's an important message that needs to be heard into our own consciousness, because this creative project is has been released in a lot of countries, and this message being put into our consciousness means something. Like, I also think that films are messages from the deep, just like our dreams. They These have inspired a lot of filmmakers, a lot of creatives to create a project to give out this message because they wanted to help us. It's a really great style when, or it's a great lens when trying to reframe Athena, the goddess of war and strategic planning, into an empathetic goddess of, maybe we have been missing the point of her being an epitome of war, of the strategic planning, or a goddess of war. That maybe we have been missing the point wherein the there's really a winner or loser in a war. There's only innocent lives being killed. And the last thing I want to talk about was maybe it's I highlighted in my introduction. This is a story of redemption, that there is really never lost hope in this case. That even though, or maybe I wanted to say, Odysseus may not have this sudden enlightenment on, or sudden realization of the true essence of war, of the true reality of war, when he wasn't able to use his intelligence to win the battle or gain victory in the Trojan War, when he hasn't witnessed and fully realized that what his innovations of being able to think of that deception, of that action, of having the horse, maybe he wasn't he will not realize that fully if he hadn't done that, if hadn't felt the weight and burden of his own doings. So in that sense, he was really made to have that internal conflict and fully realize, in order to change, in order to have redemption, or in order for him to have the transformation and tell a story that, I mean, in order to tell a story about the true realities of war. And I think that suffice for for my film reaction video. And I have a lot more to say in a sense, but I think that would suffice for now. And I really like that, although this is about Odysseus and the true and his journey back to his kingdom, and it is really an adventurous journey of being able to meet a lot of archetypes and characters. And I really like that it's like an elevated consciousness. I mean, Odysseus had an elevated consciousness wherein I think it was because of the lotus flower he was eating when he was deserted in an island, and being able to see Athena, the goddess of war and strategic planning. I really like that. Again, Odysseus was being helped, he was being guided, and he was being made realize that all of his experiences, all of these bad experiences, all of the weight that he had been carrying because of the consequences of his actions were not put in vain, and that he can tell a story of the truth of war and have a redemption in a sense in turn. Okay, thank you so much for listening. And if you can see the film in any form or later in an online release, go see the film and enjoy it.